This is one of the most important elections, if not the most important election in this year's election. And I want to welcome Ed Case, who's a participant in it. He's a candidate for U.S. Senate. And apparently you're a pretty scary guy because we can't get Congresswoman Mazie Hirono on the show. Yeah, she's your opponent, of course.
You called me the big bad wolf, I think.
I did. You must be the big bad wolf.
I don't.
You must be very scary.
I don't know what's so scary. I think it's kind of basic. You know, you want to be a United States Senator, I would think you would want to debate the issues, first of all. I think you would believe that that was a job requirement. After all, the United States Senate is the world's greatest deliberative body. It's been known as that for 200 plus years now. And it is the place in the country, if not the world, where issues are debated, issues are discussed, they are defended, they are advocated, they are sifted, they are sorted out. They are put together and taken apart, and the people that serve in the United States Senate better know how to do all of that in the public glare. You can't be, hiding behind your handlers. You can't be, reading off of a script all the time. You can't be pointed in the right direction and wound up and told which way to go. You got to be a United States Senator. And so, in all honesty, although we're joking about it right now, I think it is just, kind of an insult to the voters, first of all, that Congresswoman Hirono has declined 10 plus debates at this point. And by the way, the decline doesn't mean that she actually said no. She's actually not said no to anything, but she has been considering a number of debates for almost 4 months now.
And the debates keep passing, the dates keep passing, because I know I've actually invited her on the show by herself and also with you as well. Hoping that she'll come on and we can have a debate, but she has declined even as far back as January when I invited her, or we invited her to the SBH conference, the Smart Business Hawaii conference, to debate you there.
Well, the Smart Business Hawaii annual conference, of course, which is the #1 gathering of small businesses in Hawaii every year, was in January, and both me and Mazie were declared candidates for the Senate for some months before that, 6 months plus before that. You extended your invitation, as I recall, in something like October or November, so it wasn't something that came up on everybody's calendar suddenly.
Right.
And as I recall, Congress was not also in session on that date, so there was no reason or excuse to worry about whether Congress was in or out of session. Now, if Congress is in session on a debate, then I give her the benefit of that. She should stay in Congress and do her job. But if Congress is not in session in the middle of a U.S. Senate campaign, the presumption is she's going to be home and available. And there have been, like I said, 10 plus opportunities. And these are opportunities that give a wide range of citizens the opportunity to check us out side by side, to listen to us, to consider who can do the job of a United States Senator. That's what this election is really about. Who can step up to the plate, take over not only for Senator Akaka, but in time for Senator Inoue as the senior senator, in all likelihood. And who can provide the kind of national leadership that we need in this country today. One United States Senator is crucial to any state and to the country. We can't afford to waste any of those. So the invitations have ranged all the way from every TV station, all of the TV stations, for statewide TV debates. One station wants to get us on for 2 statewide TV debates. Public broadcasting, public TV wants to get us on. Organizations ranging from Hawaii Pacific University to the Konokohala Chamber of Commerce. We have a pending debate invitation from the Chamber of Commerce of Hawaii. And there have been a range of other opportunities, including, by the way, interestingly, the Democratic Party of Hawaii itself. Now, I would think that would be safe ground for her, but
You would think so.
So I don't know what to make of it. I think that I don't think it's a matter of me scaring anybody. I think it's a matter of her simply not wanting to engage in the election and being concerned on her side that perhaps it will not be viewed favorably, and thinking that somehow she's nursing the best position she's going to have in this U.S. Senate campaign, and let's just sit on it and hide behind our money and not taking any chances. And in all honesty, I think, again, that's not only not right for the voters of Hawaii, but it is not what a United States Senator should be all about.
It'd be interesting to see how far she takes it, how long she takes it, and if she ever decides that she will have a debate, and if so, which TV station she'd select, and if, because when you debated Senator Akaka, there was only one debate also, right? And was that PBS?
There were actually 2 debates
in
that particular race. There was one debate that was put on by the Hawaii Publishers Association, which was a side-by-side in person, not televised, but it was a debate, a joint discussion. And the debate we had was on on Hawaii Public Television. As I recall, it was a Friday night at 8 o'clock.
I was there. I remember very well.
And I think there was a great sports event on. So
yes, right.
It wasn't as if anybody much was watching it. In all honesty, so I think what we'll probably see as the pressure builds on her, because I'm out campaigning around the state. I canvass myself. I talk to voters in shopping centers and stores and at their front doors and spend time in community events, and they get it. They know what's happening, and sooner or later that catches up with a candidate, and you start to feel incredible pressure because voters are going to make their decision based on whether you debated or not. They're going to judge you on that basis, and so what you do is you just kind of toss one out there, the least visible one, the least damaging one. If you mess up, nobody's going to know, and then you just say that you, of course, you debated. So you try to take the issue off the table, and of course, so I expect fully that kind of what's going to happen here is they will kind of take the one that's the most removed, the one that's the least visible, the one that's the most innocuous, and they'll kind of accept going up the ladder. But the last ones that they'll get anywhere close to, if they can avoid it, are the statewide TV debates on prime time, which is exactly what's been offered. And if you're a United States Senator, you got to play in prime time. So evidently they don't like that test.
So she thinks she's just going to get in on her looks alone, huh?
She thinks she's going to get in on something other than debating. It's really funny, actually. I was sent a political cartoon that's been circulating around on the net, and it's a depiction of Mazie in front of the U.S. Capitol. And I won't get into exactly what the depiction is because it's not particularly flattering. It's a mock-up of her as a barnyard animal that generally doesn't get into fights. And she's holding a placard, and the placard says, "No debates, just watch my commercials."
Oh, that's funny. And that kind of sums it up. Let me guess, was it a chicken?
Well, I said I wasn't going to say
it.
Darn. But, again, we make light of this. And, in all honesty, it's in some ways humorous almost, but it's sad.
It is kind of sad. I mean, because like you said, you're in the U.S. Senate, and we want our politicians to be able to debate. I know I've been frustrated myself because I've invited many people on the show. I've offered them time to express their campaign, and you know how it is. I might give you a little bit of a hard time, but I let you have your say, right? Just like everyone else.
But that's what you do as a United States Senator.
That's right.
You've got to be able to take it in the public glare. You've got to be able to answer and defend yourself against you voracious media types. And this is a test of a job requirement. Again, it's not, so we'll see what happens. I frankly hope it catches up with her because it would be pretty sad to have a senator that couldn't do that.
Okay, well, we know you're not a big bad wolf. I was just kidding in my little column. But tell me about your main platform, because this is a forum for you to be able to get out there to the voters what you're running on, what you think is most important. I know you've been on the show many times and you've talked about the economy, taxes, jobs, and things like that being real important. And you've laid out 7 additional focuses for your campaign. So why don't you get into it and tell us what
this
your
is
ideas.
This is really a direct contrast between me and Mazie, and the reason I'm focusing on Mazie rather than Linda Lingle or anybody else is because the only election I'm in right now is a primary election on August 11th.
It's the Democratic primary, right?
The Democratic primary on August 11th. Mazie is my opponent.
Right.
I mean, I don't think that Lingle is going to avoid debates if I win the Democratic primary. I think that would be a fascinating election between me and.
I think she would debate. She's a good speaker. You're a good speaker, so it would be a good.
I think we would have a constructive discussion of our views on being a United States senator, something that the public could actually, get into and make an informed decision on. But the reason that I'm focusing with Mazie is because I'm not at the Lingle stage yet, and everybody can vote in the Democratic primary, so that's the reason that we're talking to folks about the Democratic primary. A direct contrast, though, is that, and you can figure this out for yourself just by going to my website at edcase.com. I am laying out what I think we should do, step by step by step. No kind of vague throwaway, let's save the economy without the details, and let's do this and that with foreign policy. I'm trying to be very specific about what I think we need to do, because I think people are owed my ideas and my agenda, so they can judge me. So So that's one of the reasons that the debate would be so good. What does Mazie think that the crucial issues are, and what would she do about them? We've already had a little bit of an interchange through the press, for example, on the budget, where one of the media folks asked us how would we balance the budget, and I laid it out in some detail, and Mazie gave some 2 or 3 sentence throwaways, and I same old things that you hear from Congress all the time, which are just kind of basically avoidance, and I kind of went after that, and they took insult at it. I said, well, I'm sorry, but your budget plan is nothing, and you either don't understand it, or you're just trying to avoid it, or you're just trying to deceive people. I don't know which one it is, but here it is. So from my perspective, we have tried to lay out our budget, our agenda on a number of issues, and we're laying them out as we go along. But so thus far, what I've talked about is fixing Washington, growing our economy, balancing our budget, improving our energy availability and sustainability, higher education, and a couple of other...
tourism and military
tourism,
too, right?
Very, very specific agendas on tourism, being 25% of our economy here, and our military presence, which is almost 25% of our economy. So if you're talking about one of the #1 issues for our state and our country, but for our state being growing our economy, you better talk about 50% of our economy to start with, and that's what we've tried to do. But from my perspective, the 3 big issues, I call them the 3 biggest issues, challenges that we have to face. And the reason I say they're the 3 biggest challenges is because in any situation, you're going to have kind of the macro stuff. If you take care of the macro stuff, you find that the stuff underneath it gets a little bit easier to solve. But if you don't take care of it, you can devote all of your energy to one particular issue, and you're never going to get it solved because you didn't take care of the foundation to start with. So these are the foundations, and they are, I already mentioned them, fixing Washington, growing our economy, and balancing our budget. The fixing Washington is kind of a starting point for all of this. Because we can talk all we want about what to do to fix our economy and to fix our budget and to fix education and to preserve Social Security and Medicare. But if Washington is not going to do it because it's just paralyzed in this incredible stagnation, then it's just words. So we have to focus on fixing Washington first.
So one of the things I've noticed, because I had Charles Dejoux on recently, and I've had many press releases from Governor Lingle, one of the things they're focusing on too is they're calling themselves centrists, and they're calling themselves bipartisan. And I know one of your issues is that we have to bring the 2 sides together, that there's too much diversity, not diversity, but division between Democrats and Republicans, the right and the left, and nobody's working together. Is that kind of what you mean by fixing Washington?
That's in large part what I mean, but I'd go a little bit further than just kind of, I think that the way they've characterized it is perhaps a little simplistic. I think that there's incredible division in our country, first of all. And by the way, I think the division is more inside of Washington than outside of Washington. I think most of us are very capable of overcoming our divisions and working things out.
Sure, yeah.
But Washington isn't. Now, why is that? Well, I think there's really two big divisions in our country that have to be overcome in Washington. The first is a partisan division. Now, usually that's kind of thrown out there as a, Republican versus Democrat. But the real problem is that it's the far left of the Democrats yelling at the far right of the Republicans with no moderate Democrat or moderate voices being heard. They're driven by that far left, far right. And of course, almost by definition, the far extremes of each party have nothing in common. That's what this defines them as extremes. And so what you have is a situation where there's just not a whole bunch of chance that they're going to be able to work things out to start with because they're too busy trying to win a crusade. Their holy crusade from the extremes. And Mazie's part of that. She is, if you take the 435 members of the United States House of Representatives and rank them with 1 being the most liberal and 435 being the most conservative, then Mazie is number 6. That's how she's rated. So she's the 6th most liberal of 435 members. Now, there's not a whole bunch of chance under those circumstances that she's going to be able to work something out with anybody other than the slice that she occupies. So that's one huge division, and we obviously need to break through that division.
And when you were in Congress, you were a member of the Blue Dog Democrats, which are the more moderate group.
Well, it's a little. That's not quite correct.
Okay, tell me.
That's how the Blue Dogs are characterized.
Yeah.
But either that's not what the Blue Dogs were, or that wasn't the kind of Blue Dog I was.
Okay.
I was a Blue Dog Democrat because the Blue Dogs were a caucus within the Democratic Party that was especially focused on economic and budget sustainability.
Got it.
And they felt, and we felt, that nobody else was talking about the condition of the federal budget in either party, because everybody had their head in the sand, didn't want to deal with it. The choices were too tough. And I mean, we advocated for some of the most basic stuff you could imagine. For example, what we advocated for was something called PAYGO. PAYGO means that if you want to increase the cost of the federal government in one area, it has to be budget neutral. You can't borrow that money that you just increased. You have to either increase taxes somewhere or reduce some other program so that it's neutral. It's zero. It's a zero-based budgeting. And similarly, if you want to reduce taxes and you're going to lose revenues, then either increase taxes somewhere else or reduce some costs somewhere else, but it's got to be revenue neutral.
Kind of common sense.
It's common sense, but it wasn't the way it was practiced when I was in Congress.
And it's still not the way it is, right?
And no, as a matter of fact, after I left Congress, both bodies of the Congress and the president adopted some forms of PAYGO.
Right.
So that was a little bit of a success. Now they've got too many, pukas in it right now. They can't get out of it all.
And too many expenditures compared to
too
revenues.
many. Well, yeah. I mean, that's the whole problem.
Yeah.
They're still operating at a $1.3 trillion budget per year, and the debt. When I went into Congress, the total national debt was $6 trillion. That was 10 years ago, and today it's almost 16 trillion.
Right.
So that's just an amazing increase. But the Blue Dogs, so in that sense, the Blue Dogs were moderate, not conservative,
right.
but moderate, somewhere
right.
in the middle of those two extremes. Where I differed, in all honesty, with many of my fellow Blue Dogs was more on social issues, because I am a social conservative. I'm a little bit of a semi-unique creature from a Washington perspective, but not, I don't think, from a Hawaii perspective, in that I am moderate on fiscal and economic issues, but a little bit more liberal, if I can put it that way.
Yeah, because I was going to say, you just said conservative. You're not a social conservative. You're very liberal on your social issues, right?
Right. Did I say that wrong?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's get
just
that one
straight. Just
want to
get it on the record. Emily's list might be listening. I know. I'm just kidding. But anyway, yeah.
So some of the Blue Dogs came from a little bit more conservative states, and were a little bit more conservative. So in that sense, I was a little out of step with them.
Right.
But that wasn't their focus.
Yeah.
Their focus was on fiscal economic stuff. So we differed on some issues, but on the issues of balancing our budget, we didn't differ. So that's one of the great divisions, is the R versus the D division. But the other great division, just as great, is inside Washington versus outside Washington. Because let's face it, most of us think inside Washington is just completely out of step with the rest of the country,
right.
just like its own different world. And in all honesty, when you're inside of Washington, you lose sight of the rest of the country unless you really work hard to stay in touch. And the kind of whirlpool, if I can put it that way, of insider influence and money and special interest and lobbying and beneficial special interest decisions inside of Washington that characterizes Washington today, where you've got this link between lobbying and campaign contributions and re-election and members of Congress and decisions and lobbying, and it's been corrosive, if not corruptive, and certainly destructive to our democracy. And it's created a division between inside Washington and outside. And so when you have these two huge divisions, one being a partisan extreme division, exacerbated by an inside-outside division, and by the way, the inside division has nothing to do with party at all. Nothing at all to do with party. They're all doing it. Then that'll really create a very destructive situation there. And you've got to break it. And the only really way to break it is to get people to go there that are willing and able and committed to doing it differently. So in that sense, when Charles and Linda talk about simply sitting down and working it out from a nonpartisan or bipartisan way, that's part of it, but you got to a third right there. You still got to punch through on the remainder, which is, okay, how do you do that? And who does it? And can you find fellow travelers to do it with? And so that's my commitment, and that's how to fix Washington. And you know, it's simple to talk about, very hard to do. It's not going to be easy. It's going to take a long time. But that's the #1 agenda. You can fix some of the rules in Washington. The filibuster rule in the Senate needs a little bit of tinkering, more than tinkering, to get the Senate to work. You can break some of those ties, like, for example, say that lobbyists cannot make campaign contributions to members of Congress, registered lobbyists, or that, you know, chiefs of staff and head committee staffers can't, you know, leave the committee one day and get a $500,000 a year job the next, or more, the next day. You can do that stuff a little bit, but sometimes I find that people that talk about it put too much credence in that. You can do all of those fixes, but if you don't fix the system and the people themselves, then you're not going to get anywhere. So that's fixing Washington.
Now, what about focusing on Mazie Hirono? What do you think is her worst vote, or some of the votes that she's done that have bothered you? Can you pinpoint any that are off the top, or is it just a general attitude?
Well, you know, again, I think Mazie and I, just from our pure political philosophy, she's, like I said earlier, she's ultra liberal across the board.
Right.
So on every issue, she's ultra liberal. So social issues, economic issues, budget issues, fiscal issues, foreign policy issues, and every other issue. She will be at the extreme of the Democratic Party, and thus at the very extreme of Congress. And that translates into votes. And she's had thousands of votes during the course of her time in Congress, as did I. So there's a record for people to choose from. Our votes will be fairly similar on social issues, because we do think alike on social issues. But we will have mixed kind of votes on fiscal and economic and some of the foreign policy issues. I think the two issues that come to mind as you asked me that question, actually one just occurred very, very recently, where Mazie and her fellow Progressive Caucus members, so those are the most liberal members of the U.S. House, the Democratic Party, they constitute perhaps a third of the Democrats in Congress. So obviously they're a sixth of all members. And they offered a progressive budget that basically did nothing to deal with you know, the size of government, jacked taxes up, jacked spending up, didn't balance at all. Kind of represented their worldview of how we should be running this country, which is not my worldview. It was, you know, a worldview encompassed in a budget that essentially forgot about the role of business in creating jobs and revenues for government, didn't rein in the cost of government, didn't talk about efficiency. And so that's not my worldview. And that budget, as a matter of fact, was defeated on a vote of 78-4 and something like 270 against. And the 78-4 was, I think, let me think about it, 78-4 and about 110 Democrats against, including Congresswoman Hanabusa.
So the majority of Democrats were
The majority of Democrats opposed this budget, including Congresswoman Hanabusa, who I do think has a more mainstream, you know, view in terms of the voters in Hawaii, and is not Mazie from that perspective. So that's one vote. There were a series of votes that Mazie took in the last number of years that really, I believe, would have cut our defense budget too far. So in other words, not only hurt national defense, but certainly hurt Hawaii.
It's interesting because the president's kind of doing the opposite thing, where he's now talking about moving troops to Australia. You know, we have more focus on North Korea, we have more focus on China, and we're, of course, in the Pacific, and we're kind of in the middle of all of that. So cutting the budget does really impact Hawaii in terms of military.
Well, I think that I think we have to at least level out the defense budget. I don't think we can afford the escalation in the defense budget that we've seen in recent years. We cannot afford it, and we don't need it from a national security perspective. And for us, and you know, sometimes we worry about that here in Hawaii, but the fact of the matter is that the way that our national security and national defense strategy is working in the big picture, the reductions in growth in the defense budget are not going to come at the expense of the Asia-Pacific region.
Definitely not right
Generally,
now.
or Hawaii specifically, this is, in fact, we are in fact in the Asia-Pacific century, and that's a century of both opportunity and risk.
Right.
That's a central challenge of our foreign policy over the next generation, is what's happening in the Asia Pacific generally and with China specifically. That's number one. And I think Mazie and I differ on that. I don't know whether she agrees with that or doesn't understand it, one or the other. But again, it'd be a lovely thing to debate.
It would be.
But I think that, so I think some of her votes there were I think represented less a concern over any kind of budgetary impact of the Defense Department as much as, again, either a misunderstanding or in some cases a hostility to defense generally and the Defense Department and the military specifically. I don't think that she's, you know, somebody that naturally supports that.
So you get to go to Washington. What is the very first thing you're going to do?
The very first thing I'm going to
Besides, you know where the bathrooms are because you've already worked there. So.
I've been in the bathrooms.
After that.
Well, I'm going to raise my hand and take the oath, that's for sure.
There you go, there you go. Well, what do you think the most important issues to tackle first?
You know, one of the most important things that you do right off the bat in Washington is figure out what committees you're going to serve on.
Right.
And those committees have to reflect, from my perspective, your committee membership reflects a couple of different things. Oh, I forgot. The first thing I'm going to do is go over to Senator Inouye and
say hello.
No, I'm not going to say hello. I'm going to say, Senator Inouye, it's going to be a privilege and a pleasure to serve with you, and how can I help?
And you can say aloha too, right? Nothing wrong with hello, right?
No, aloha. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it highlights the issue that this is a partnership. We do have a delegation there, and I'm going to work with that delegation. And in terms of committee membership, that's part of what you do as a delegation. You try to figure out where the pukas are. Because if somebody else is serving on a committee somewhere in Congress among the four of us, then you don't want to double up on that. So you want to take the committees that there is a need for Hawaii. I think you want to take the committees that there's a need for the country. And I think you want to take some committees where there is a personal passion that will drive you over the course of decades to lead in that area. So I would definitely be looking for that. And like I said earlier, I'd be looking for my fellow travelers right off the bat, people that want the same thing I want. When I went to the state legislature, the first thing I did was to make an appointment to meet personally with each of my fellow 50 members in the state legislature, and that took a while to do. And I sat down with each one of them, and we just said, this is who I am, and this is who you are, and where do you want to get, and this is where I want to get, and where do we have common ground? And that was one of the most valuable things I ever did in my political career. Nobody else does that. And I think that, with the 99 fellow senators, I'd want to know who they are and see how I could help them and work with them. And I think in that process, I would find my fellow travelers. That's great. Well, we're already out of time, so we'll tell people to go to edcase.com. We'll have you on again, and hopefully this time there actually will be a debate. Okay, fine. Thank you. We invite Mazie to join us too. That's right. There you go. This has been the News Behind the News. Thank you for joining us. Aloha.